Hi everybody. Using Arisa's value study, I'm going to show you guys one way to go about doing your final illustration for the first project. Now, of course, everybody kind of did their projects differently. Some did a thumbnail, and then are going to maybe a more cleaned up illustration after your value studies. Maybe some like to go from the value studies on. It's really up to you. I'm going to post some videos on that a little bit later today as well. But I thought that I'd take the opportunity to show you guys using, again, a recess value study, how to maybe use the blending modes that are found in Photoshop to add or play around with the lighting and shadows in Photoshop. Now, I touched upon this in the Zoom Hangout, but the blending modes doesn't really come into play until maybe a week or two from now, where when we get into colors, the blending modes basically can be found when you enact the brush and then go to mode and you have a little bit of a subcategory here, or when you head to the layer section and then over here you have the subcategories there. The blending mode basically allows you to add color to, let's say, a black and white illustration, or enhance colors that are already there using some of the blending modes like multiply, overlay, color dodge. It allows you to add special effects like glows and create really cool looking power sets. Like, let's say you have a character, glowing eyes, fire, lasers, and most importantly, it allows you to composite in Photoshop, which means that you can take like various images and it allows you to kind of, meld them all together to create one complete image. So, for this demonstration, I'm going to show you guys using black and white only, not introducing color right now, to add shadows and lighting in your illustration, or if you're still playing around with your value studies, or if you're finishing it up already. Again, I chose a recess here because I think that they have a really complete value study here, meaning that a lot of a lot of grays are placed everywhere, and I can play around with it really easily. Now, of course, I could definitely see Arisa place more values in the background, like add more different values so that to complete the background as well. But the character looks pretty good. Well, the first thing I'm going to do here, though, is since I'm working with a JPEG, it's a locked image, so I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to adjust image, adjust levels, adjust the contrast slightly. I really want some of the lighting to pop up and some of the darks to be darker. So basically, if you use the levels, you're going to get a histogram like this, where it shows you the values that are currently within the composition. As you can see here, there's no pure black, there's a lot of midtones, and very little highlight. So I really want a little bit more darker values in here, so I'm going to take my dark slider, which is this dark, midtone, and highlights. I'm going to take my dark slider, move it towards the little histogram here, just to give it a little bit more oomph to it, you know what I mean? A little bit more contrast. Now let me take the midtone. I'm going to get rid of some of that midtone by pushing that just a little bit so that, again, I have just a little bit more contrast. Another thing I'm going to do is, since I noticed that it's not purely black and white, I'm going to go to Image, Adjust, and Black and White. That will make it purely black and white. Because here's before. Can you see a little bit of a red tint in the character there? But if you want to purely make it black and white, go to Image, Adjustment, Black and White. Alright, so let's mess around with the lighting really quickly. So Arisa already set up a lighting situation, but let's start brand new here. Let's give it a little bit of a different lighting. For this one, let's say I want to put it up here. So let me add a little indicator. Our lighting is coming from above, our character, meaning that everything above is going to be lit. There's going to be shadows in some areas, and of course, since our lighting is up here, it's going to affect the background as well. You want to keep that in mind. So the first thing that we're going to do is to create a brand new layer. I used a brand new layer for this one as well. But I'm going to lock this one so that I don't mess around with it. I'm going to the newly created layer, and I'm going to click on my blending modes. Blending modes again. Let me move this layer panels here. The blending modes is found right above the lock. It says normal. You also have to keep in mind that your target layer, you have to place it on your intended target layer, right? So right now it's set to normal. And a quick rundown on the blending modes too. You see a bunch of different categories here. On the first category, you have the normal and dissolve. You don't usually use dissolve unless you want to add some kind of texture, but normal is usually the default setting. The next category, the second category, is the darken category. These are the core categories that allows you to add and sort of gel color into your layers. Opposite of that is the lighten category, the third category, which is that allows you to brighten up values or colors within the composition. The ones over here, the fourth one, I call it the special effects category. I use it to add saturation, contrast, lighting effects. So this is the category here. Excuse me. Fifth category, I really don't use very much. I rarely use any of these at all. The last category, I mainly use saturation, color, and hue. Basically, just to add a general color mapping onto your illustration. But most of what I use are pretty much up here. 1, 2, 3, and the fourth one. Alright, so let's get to the first thing I want to do is probably to add shadows, right? So to add shadows, I'm going to use, let's say, a dark value like black. I'm going to use my hard brush. I'm going to set my hard brush to maybe 100% with the toggle on. Remember, I said in the Hangout, the toggle on allows you to create like a rendering effect rather than a blocked-in effect. So, excuse me, guys. I'm going to show you guys two ways to add shadows here. First way, paint it on. So again, black, brush, hard brush, like a normal default hard brush, toggle on 100%, and I'm just going to map out where my shadows are going to be. Actually, it's supposed to be here, right? So the hat, maybe above her head, like the rim of the hat is adding shadows to the top of her head. So it looks kind of weird because it's an opaque brush and I'm just painting over it. Now, you could get away with setting this to normal and just lowering the opacity just to add shadows, but you're not going to get like the nuanceness to it. Like you're not going to get the nuanced placement to it. It's just going to sit right on top of your illustration. So what you want to do is set this one to multiply. So multiply allows you to make that shadow feel much, how do I say it? It feels more like it's actually wrapping around the object rather than just sitting on top of it, right? So if I lower the opacity, set to multiply, again, this is our shadow category. Multiply is probably my favorite for adding shadows. To lower it, just generally place it on. Maybe under the chin, right over here. Maybe the dress. Under the chin here. I'm paying close attention to the shapes within the object. It's going to wrap around like a circular shape, like the nose and the head. And the great thing again, if you're working with layers, you can create as much layers as you want. You can set this one to multiply. Maybe put this behind and then add shadows to your backgrounds. So that you can manipulate them separately. Work in layers, guys. Utilize the layers as much as you can by creating a brand new layer and then setting it to multiply. You can have as much layers as you want in Photoshop. The only real problem is probably just keeping up with all the type of layers that you have. So eventually you are going to have to merge a couple of layers together once you're finished. That's pretty good. Another way that you could pretty much add shadow, let me just turn these guys off, is to add a brand new layer. Take our fill tool, which is the paint bucket tool right over here, and just put it right on top. Now set that one to multiply, and then lower the opacity. And instead of using the brush to place the shadow, you're taking your eraser and basically erasing areas where light is going to hit. So basically a reverse version of what we just did. So I'm giving you here options to depending on how you work. Sometimes maybe you like to brush it on, sometimes you like to kind of carve the light out. In later modules, we're going to talk about the masking tool and also some of the other masking features to help you do this without using the eraser, because the eraser tends to be very permanent. Like if you make a mistake 10 steps back, that means you have to go 10 steps back just to correct it. But again, we'll talk about the masking tool in a later module, so you guys won't get too overwhelmed with what Photoshop has to offer. But feel free to look it up if you'd like. So again, I'm just using the erase tool here to basically shine where the light is going to be. So yeah, you can either carve the light out and just leave the shadow behind, or paint the shadows in. It's really up to you what you want to do. So holding Shift key, you can highlight the layers that you want and let's merge it together. Now if you merge two things together that are set in like a blending mode, it will revert back to the normal setting. So maybe that's something that you want to think about and maybe do in the very end. Or either that, go back and just set it back to multiply. Alright, so that's shadow. Now let's add some light. For this demonstration, I'm just going to use a different color, like maybe a yellow, just so that it shows up just a little bit more. But again, you have to do it in black and white, or you can add color and revert to black and white. That's another option. But I created a brand new layer, and I set this one to overlay. This category here, lighting category, is pretty good too, but I tend to like overlay because it has more, it interacts with all the values underneath just a little bit better. So let me try that. So I mapped out where the shadow is, so I set this one to overlay. I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to set it to 100% opacity again, but then click on the opacity toggle, remember that. I'm just going to brush it on. Here's my light. Actually, let me show you guys in values so that I can show different types of values. So let's say set this into overlay, and then I'm going to use like a gray value just to add some initial lighting on top. And then you can create another layer on top of that, set it to overlay again, and then use a much lighter value so you can get different levels of lighting. You can use the software for this too, but to get a much smoother look to it. But use the hard brush. I'll explain that more in another video as well. The hard brush will allow you to basically map stuff out and put like block in values or colors a lot stronger than a soft brush would. See how it interacts with all the values underneath? If I set this one to normal, it'll cover up everything that you drew underneath it. But setting this to overlay will allow some of those values, like the nose, the darker values, to come through just a little bit more. One thing that the values doesn't do, however, I mean the blending modes do, however, is that sometimes they become transparent, right? So sometimes you have to create a brand new layer set at a normal layer, just so that you can add some of those highlights that you want opaque. Meaning that, let's say that you want like a highlight on the eye. Sometimes it's hard to do that using a blending mode, so you have to do it in an opaque paint. So take a brush, a brand new layer set to normal, and you have to actually paint that in there. I'm sorry guys, my cat's like stepping all over the keys right now. Oh, bad. And another thing that you want to do in a normal setting is that if you want, you can't just rely on the blending modes. You have to start a brand new layer again on top of everything. And, you have to go back in there and complete the illustration and start sort of blending everything together, making everything sharp, adding in those extra details. Those you cannot do with a blend mode. You have to actually go back in and paint them in. So, I mean, as cool as the blend mode is and as cool as the things that you can do with it, you still have to go back in there and add in all the extra details that you need to add and keep blending on top of it. I posted some videos on rendering and blending, and if you haven't checked out the Hangout recording yet, please check it out. I go through blending there as well. And also, this Saturday, I'm going to be holding another Zoom Hangout, so please, if you guys can make it, I think it will be totally beneficial for you guys. Because we're going to go through rendering in a much more detailed way than we did during the Hangout. Yes. So take your time, especially if you're completing your illustrations already. Take your time with it. If you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to let me know. See how hard that shadow I added in before? On an opaque background, you can just start blending that in a little bit better. Or an opaque layer, sorry. So really take your time with it. I'm going to keep repeating myself over and over throughout the semester, but use references, guys. Don't be afraid of references. It's not going to bite you. You need it to help support your ideas when you're painting. Because without it, you're just sort of just making things up, and sometimes it's not going to come across as, the thing you're trying to make it come across, because it's not true to life, or like or what have you. And references could be for anything. It could be for structure, anatomy, lighting, colors. When we get into colors, um, look up not just real life photograph, but look up other artists and see how they accomplish. Like, let's say, okay, I'm having trouble with fur. Maybe look up an artist that you like or somebody you come across and see how they handle fur and try to sort of, um, take what they've done and learn from it, and then apply it into your own arsenal, or your own, uh, what can I just say here? Your own workflow. Your own workflow. I guess that's a better word for it. Yeah, learn from other artists. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. Is just keep researching and looking for references. For example, here, maybe I'm going for more of a Bobby Chiu type situation where his fur is a little bit more cartoony. You can see the brush strokes in them, like this. Or you could go for something else, like another artist maybe would do more, instead of showing like individual little furs, just use a texture to kind of mimic how fur looks like. You could also use another layer, maybe to correct something. Her hat's a little bit tilted. So please, if you have some chance or some time, please watch the Zoom Hangout from this week. I go over the brushes, I go over layers, the importance of higher resolution documents versus working with a document that's not of higher resolution. So I go through a lot of things in that Zoom Hangout. So yeah, just please check it out if you can. So here I'm adding in lighting. I use the blend mode as a base, but here I'm just kind of painting that lighting in. And don't be afraid to put your brushes down. Use the layers. If you don't like something, you can just throw it away and start all over again. Like every 10 minutes or so, as I'm painting, I'm adding a brand new layer on top of it. On. Like another good thing for references, especially for me, which I use constantly, are the hands. Like this, and also maybe the dress. Like I'm not sure how like very 50s era dresses would look like if this is basically what you're going for. Here, the light's gonna hit the top here, top of the arm there. And then just keep building those layers. I'm using a soft brush, add a little bit of a lighting, And as you can notice there, I use the soft brush sparingly, maybe towards the very end, to add that light glow. So do this stuff, like the glows, the ambient lighting, do that towards the end, because what you want to do is to block it in and render first before adding in special effects like this. Because if I did this a lot earlier, and let's say I don't like it, and I merged everything together, you're gonna spend a lot of time just painting that back out, and you're gonna mess something up. So either put this on a separate layer, or just wait till the end to add stuff like this, like things that overlap the whole illustration. You want to keep things sort of like uh, individualized for now. Do the character, do the background, and then use stuff like this to glow. In the case of color, like some kind of color pass in the future, do that towards the very end. So just to showcase that lighting direction. And then what I like to do, and I highly recommend it as well, excuse me, let's just copy and paste this really quickly, is to start with a brand new document. I wish I said this earlier. Copy your original thumbnail or your original art. And as you go along, and as you're merging, let's say I merged everything together. Here's the former, here's the latter. And then copy it again, and continue paint on top of it using different layers again. See, for this one, maybe I just want to add a light post here that's really, really dark, maybe a black light post, so that you have like a foreground object right here. Or maybe that doesn't look good. Maybe I'll just use like some kind of a, just in the foreground, maybe like a trash can or some kind of a foreground object. Just so that I have a foreground and background in the middle ground. Like a table. And then let's blur this. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. So you have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And let's say I'll merge these two together. So if, let's say, okay, I don't really like it. I'm looking at it right now. I wish I could go back to the way it was. Turn that off. You still have this version here. You could throw that away. And copy it again. And then you can just continue. So, I mentioned this in the Zoom Hangout. Just look ahead. Think ahead in steps and layers. Like, if you want to try something out, like create a checkpoint by doing what I just did and copying and pasting it, so that you always have that other version later on. Alright, that's pretty much it. I'm going to be posting a lot more stuff throughout the day, and also I'm going to be continuing with your critiques. So please look out for those to drop throughout the day. And that's pretty much it. I'm also going to be posting something about the Zoom Hangout number 2, so please, if you have time, Saturday most likely, please just come hang out, even for half an hour or so. Alright, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys very much. Have a safe rest of the day. Bye.